Hey everyone, I'm Jonah,
I'm Connor.
and welcome back to Rank and File Sports. After finishing just above 500 in 2024, Rutgers is bringing back Ethan Kaliakmanis at quarterback, and overall seems to have a pretty promising outlook for the 2025 season if it weren't for how terrible their schedule is. I mean, this is one of the toughest Power Five schedules that I've seen. Sorry, Power Four. But road trips to Minnesota, Washington, Illinois, and Ohio State, along with Iowa, Oregon, and Penn State at home, that is horrible. Absolutely horrible. Seven of the games are at home, five on the road, but this is a schedule difficulty of 8 out of 10. Maybe we're even underrating that.
Yeah, Jonah forgot to even mention who their non-conference games are. Ohio and Miami, Ohio to open the season as the top two teams from the MAC last season is by no means a cakewalk. Granted, Rutgers is still a Power Four team, and I'm gonna assume they're gonna be favored in this game. But Ohio was a very good team, very solid team out of the MAC last year. Obviously, they won the conference. Miami, Ohio was right behind them. Both these teams are very solid, but once again, we're going to have them favored. 80% chance against Ohio, 85% chance against Miami of Ohio, but that's going to be an interesting first 2 weeks of the season to see where this Rutgers team ends up. If they can handle both those teams, then I have a little bit more faith in them, but if they lose those games, they're in for a rough ride. Following week against Norfolk State, 100% chance here. They have not been good at football. I couldn't tell you anything about their football team. Maybe like a couple of years ago, for some reason, I have a memory where remember they were in a close game. It probably wasn't even against a decent team, but there was like a Hail Mary to win the game or something like that. But 100% chance for the Scarlet Knights in this one. Then their first Big Ten game is going to be at home against Iowa. Now, Iowa is bringing in Mark Gronowski from South Dakota State to be their quarterback. He was given an invite to the NFL draft this season, but bypassed it to play one more year in college football, this time moving up to the FBS level. It's expected to make a splash in the Big Ten, but it's Iowa's offense. Take it with a grain of salt. Defensively, Iowa is still going to be the team that we're always expecting from them. They're going to be a very solid team on defense. Rutgers, on the other hand, like Jonah was saying, they have their quarterback returning in Athan Kaliakmanis. I'm going to botch that name, so I'm just going to say Rutgers starting quarterback. But the rest of their team is pretty young. They have Antoine Raymond is probably going to be their lead back going into next season. He was a freshman last year, playing behind their starting running back who is going off to the NFL draft. Had 500 yards on the ground and 100 carries. That's a pretty solid season. And then all their wide receivers, except for their primary wide receiver, who was Demir Miller, will be returning, who are in their sophomore or junior seasons going into next year. So they're going to have a lot of young weapons. It's just going to be, does the youth and raw athleticism translate to beating experienced teams? And I don't think that's going to be the case that much this season. So with Iowa, even though it's at home, it's going to be a tough first game in Big Ten play. So 35% chance for Rutgers to get a win here. And then they go on the road to face Minnesota. Minnesota's one team that we're very high on in the Big Ten. I think they're a little underrated. PJ Fleck is one of the best coaches in the Big Ten, I would argue. It's been very consistent year after year for this Golden Gophers program. And I think they're in for a very solid season going into next year. You can watch our schedule preview video to find out more about that. But compared to Rutgers, once again, I think experience is going to be the key here. So a 25% chance for Rutgers to get the win on the road going into their first bye week.
Next up is a road trip to Washington, and we're actually pretty high on this Huskies team. Not to mention, this is an incredibly long flight for Rutgers. Uh, I just don't see them really competing with Washington, especially on the road. only a 20% chance to win that one. Then they got Oregon at home. This one is also going to be at 20% for Rutgers. The Ducks going to be one of the best teams in college football once again. Made the Rose Bowl last season. Overall, just going to be a really, really good team. And even though the Scarlet Knights have the home field advantage, there's really not much of a chance for them in this one whatsoever. Then it's Purdue on the road. Completely flipped the script from the Oregon game for this one. The Scarlet Knights are on the road here, but the Boilermakers are one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. Maybe this is one of the few games on their schedule that Purdue has a chance in, but even then, it's only about a 10% chance that they win this game. So 90% chance for a Rutgers win here on the road. The next road game, though, not any easier than the first two with Illinois. Now, the Illini are one of the favorites to potentially be the next Indiana. They have a pretty easy schedule, but there's a couple difficult games on there. So they're probably going to have to make the playoffs at 10-2 if they do end up making it. I don't think Rutgers has the capability to beat this Illinois team. I really like Luke Altmaier at the quarterback position. And I think just overall, Illinois is better and they have the home field advantage. Only 25% chance for a Rutgers win. Then it's Maryland at home. This one, a 70% chance at a Rutgers win. Really not high on this Maryland team at all this season. I think Rutgers probably just a little bit better. The home field advantage on top of that. Give me the Scarlet Knights, the 70% chance to get the win heading into their second bye week.
And then they have probably the worst two-game stretch known to mankind going into next season. A road game against the defending national champions in the Ohio State Buckeyes, and then a home game against Penn State. Starting with the Ohio State game, like I said, defending national champions. Obviously, they have to replace a lot of guys who came back for last season, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Julian Sayin is expected to get the start for the Buckeyes next season and has shown a lot of promise. Obviously, was a very highly touted recruit, started his career at Georgia and ended up transferring to Ohio State. Jeremiah Smith, probably the best wide receiver in the country. And Ohio State's been pretty active in the transfer portal as well. So, with it being at the shoe, Rutgers has no chance in this one. I know they played them pretty close in their game last season when it was at Rutgers, but I think the Buckeyes are gonna throttle the Scarlet Knight team. A 10% chance for Rutgers to get a amazing miracle win at the shoe. And then to finish the season against Penn State at home. Penn State made the college football playoffs last year, was in the Big Ten championship game, and looked pretty good against Oregon. Did end up losing to that Oregon team, but they just got better. They have Drew Eller, Katron Allen, and Nick Singleton all returning on the offensive side of the ball. I forget what his name is, but I know they have yet another amazing edge rusher that they think is gonna fill that Micah Parsons-esque role from so many seasons ago. This Penn State team is really moving towards what we expect of them. I think with Jim Knowles coming in as their defensive coordinator and after James Franklin finally was able to put some stuff together last season, I think this Penn State team is going to be dangerous. Maybe even more dangerous than a team like Oregon is going to be on par with Ohio State going into next season. This is not going to be an easy game for Rutgers. The only reason we have it slightly higher than the Ohio State game is because it's a home game for the Scarlet Knights, but don't let that fool you. Penn State should blow them out in this one, a 15% chance for the Scarlet Knights here.
Yeah, overall, I think this is going to be a pretty rough year for Rutgers. I mean, there's a lot of games on here that are just under even 25% chance to win. Like you were saying with the non-conference, winning those first two games is very important for this season. It gives them a slight chance of making a bowl game. If they lose either of those, I think that a chance of a 6-win season is completely out the window. regardless, I don't think that Rutgers quite makes it to 6-6 this year. I think we'll see them at 5-7.
Yeah, I don't want to say guaranteed, but I'm going to say it anyway. There's really only two games on here where I could really see them getting a or having like a guaranteed win where I would be surprised if they lost. And that's the Norfolk State game and the Purdue game. Maryland, I could see them losing. I can see them losing those two other non-conference games. This is a tough season. Whoever scheduled these games for Rutgers was like, yeah, we're just gonna kind of throw them to the wolves here. It's going to be a nice rebuild season. It's going to be good to develop those young guys in the wide receiver room and build for the future. But for the present, it's not going to be pretty. 5-7 is probably the highest I could see them going.
Yeah, I think maybe 6-6 is possible if they were to beat somebody like Iowa, maybe upset Minnesota, but I really don't see anything further than that. So I personally would say 6-6 is their ceiling, but it's a very low chance that they actually get to that ceiling. Last season obviously did go 7-6. Now the win projection for this year is 5.75 wins based off of all those percentages, but we do think they'll finish under that at 5-7. The Vegas over under is split with even odds at 5.5. So Vegas seems to think there's a pretty good chance that Rutgers makes a bowl game. I just don't quite see it. So we are going to have the Scarlet Knights at 5-7 in 2025. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.